For Christopher Moltisanti, it wasn't if a downfall was going to happen. It was when his tragic downfall would happen. And when it comes to Christopher dying, he was essentially a ticking time bomb, and the only thing saving him was the fact that he was Tony's nephew. If it wasn't for being Tony's first cousin, Christopher would have died much earlier than he did, as there are several times throughout the show where Christopher is saved from death, all due in part to being Tony's nephew. In this video, we will watch the tragic demise of Christopher Moltisanti, a life that could have been so much more. Before we get started, be sure to click subscribe and click the bell to get notifications on all upcoming Sopranos videos. When we're first introduced to Christopher Moltisanti, we come to know that his father was Dickie Moltisanti, a soldier in the Soprano crew, and quickly became a mentor to Christopher despite being killed in Christopher's early years as a toddler. We see Christopher follow the same path of his father of being in the mafia, and more specifically being a part of the Soprano crew with Tony. Growing up without a father and having a mother who was an alcoholic, Christopher essentially grew up on his own and thus got involved in the mafia and organized crime thanks to his first cousin, Tony. Despite not being fully related to Tony, as Christopher was more first cousins with Carmela, Tony and Christopher's relationship strengthened during their years together, as Tony acts as an older brother or mentor to Christopher, and at times their relationship can be viewed as a typical father and son relationship, where the father can always be seen mentoring and looking out for the youngster. Throughout Christopher's life, Tony was viewed as a father figure, even if he couldn't stand his guts towards the later half of the series and teased him for his sobriety. We see how important and strong their relationship is in the first episode, and how much the two mean to one another, as Christopher contemplates leaving the mafia and selling his story to his cousin's girlfriend, someone we would later meet in season 2. It's interesting to note that in Christopher's first appearance of the series and when we last see him in The Sopranos, both times he is driving Tony. This displays how far the two had gone in their relationship, as this final scene is a tribute back to the beginning days of their relationship. Early on in the series and in Christopher's life, Christopher is a young gangster who seems to be climbing up the ranks within the mafia. From Tony's perspective, we can see that he thinks highly of Christopher and would like him to take over the family if anything were to happen to Tony. Tony quickly teaches and grooms Christopher, but for others, this rise within the ranks would be too quick. But for Christopher, this rise isn't fast enough for his liking. We watch Christopher go out of his way to try and please his father figure and mentor, but also to try and gain respect and recognition from his boss and Tony, and to try and move up the ranks in hopes of becoming made. Throughout the series, we see several instances of Christopher displaying this type of behavior, but most evidently in The Legend of Tennessee Moltisanti during season 1 and in D-Girl in season 2. We watch as Christopher contemplates his current outlook on life, as he ponders the idea of leaving the mafia to pursue a career as a screenwriter. Christopher feels that everything he's done for Tony means nothing, as he kills Emil, and yet his current status as a member of the Soprano crew is at a standstill. Christopher acts as if he's getting overlooked and that he's wasting his time and life by being in the mafia. We can clearly see that he's worried about his future, identity, and his purpose in life.
I got no identity. Even Brendan Fallone's got an identity. He's dead. I killed that fucking email Cola on nothing. I don't even move up a notch.
We see this with Christopher hearing and watching the television broadcast about the latest indictments coming down, and how his deceased friend Brendan Fallone gets brought up as an associate and a soldier. This makes Christopher worried and angry about his arc in life. Christopher's anxious attitude seems to carry over throughout the episode, as he takes out his frustrations out on a bakery boy. We see Christopher display feelings of loss, emptiness, and uncertainty, as he feels that he's a nobody compared to his mafia counterparts despite killing Emil.
Well, I hope they'll be alright.
Who?
The guys.
Well, what about me?
You'll be alright. They didn't even mention your name on television.
Throughout the series, we see Christopher come to terms with himself and his realization as a gangster. While we do see Christopher make a brief attempt at making movies, becoming a screenwriter, actor, and working in the film industry, Christopher comes to terms with himself that he can't branch out into the regular world, as he's surrounded by a life of the mafia, as it's the only world he knows and the only world he's grown up in. But also, Christopher comes to terms with his epiphany and that he can't leave New Jersey or Tony, as he'll wind up dead. Being with Tony, being in New Jersey, and being in the Mafia are the only essentials Christopher has ever learned and knows how to do in life. And during Anthony Jr.'s confirmation, Tony asked Christopher to think about his future and fate for 10 minutes. Tony gives Christopher the opportunity to leave, but Christopher knows he'll wind up dead if he does so. This scene is so important to the overall arc and character storyline of Christopher, as he reflects on his current identity in life, as he knows either way he'll likely wind up dead, but ultimately chooses to remain with Tony as it's the only life he's ever known, as he makes this same decision later on in the series. And as Christopher enters back into the house of the Sopranos and the dark, toxic life of the Mafia, he seals his fate as he'll likely wind up dead with an early death, much like everyone else in the Mafia. When it came to Christopher's relationship with Adriana, it was clear to see that the two were in love with one another, but were also complete opposites. Throughout the show, we can clearly see that their relationship isn't perfect by any means, but we can clearly see that they are both madly in love with one another. All Adriana wants to do in life is be with Christopher and live happily ever after, and at times move away from New Jersey and the Mafia lifestyle. With Christopher, we see that he loves Adriana, but he doesn't know how to, as he grew up in an era and surrounded by men who are unfaithful to their wives, just like his mentor in life in Tony. As Christopher is a byproduct of men in the Mafia who lived life to their expectations and didn't feel the need to apologize for it. We watch as Christopher countlessly beats up Adriana and washes his emotions down with drugs and alcohol. Even when he meets Richie April, he tells Christopher that he can only beat up Adriana once they're married.
You want to raise your hands, you give her your last name. Then it's none of my fucking business. Until then, keep your hands in your pockets.
But when it comes to the demise of Christopher Moltisanti, nowhere do we see this downfall more when he discovers heroin. Christopher always had a relationship with drugs that dates back to season 1, as it was clear to see the foreshadowing of his drug problem and that he would eventually become a junkie. We see Christopher's beginnings with heroin take place in season 2's Commendatory, where he uses heroin for the first time with one of Furio's friends. We see how dangerous heroin is as a drug, as Christopher immediately becomes addicted to the drug and it ruins his life. It's here where Christopher has hit rock bottom by being constantly high. Whether it was at Livia's wake, cleaning up Ralph, discussing about the future of the family, getting robbed to try and buy heroin, sitting on Cosette, and as we all know, while he was driving Tony for the last time. Even in a regular Around the Margins where Christopher goes ballistic upon discovering his fiancée was in a car crash alone with his uncle, he dabbles back into drugs and almost gets himself killed. But once again, the only factor saving his life was the fact that he was Tony's nephew and Tony B ultimately saved his life. Even after becoming sober from drugs and alcohol, Christopher still gets teased by his friends and is surrounded by a lifestyle that is unhealthy for a recovering addict. With Christopher not being around the guys as much as it threatened his sobriety, it made everyone around him think less of him. They didn't understand how difficult it was for someone to become sober, especially from a drug like heroin and being surrounded by alcohol constantly with his mother growing up and the lifestyle of the Mafia that takes place at a strip club. This becomes one of Christopher's greatest struggles throughout the series, as he seems to get a grip on his disease but eventually falls back down the dark reality and begins to use drugs and alcohol again. Nowhere do we see this more than when Christopher, Tony, and Tony B are up at Uncle Pat's farm. We see Christopher display emotions and feelings, something the other gangsters never do or understand when it comes from Christopher. Christopher clearly resents his cousin Tony B, as Tony Soprano thinks more highly of him than Christopher as a result of Christopher becoming sober, as Tony doesn't think someone can change, much like himself in therapy. It was clear to see that Christopher differentiated himself from his Mafia colleagues, as he can be viewed as a more human-like gangster and one who isn't totally devoted or committed to being in the Mafia despite taking an oath. Christopher displays feelings and emotions like when he's crying here after being teased by the two Tonys. Christopher looks up to Tony, but he feels confused to why he looks up to someone who's a sociopath, narcissistic, and selfish. Tony doesn't understand Christopher's complaints when it comes to him being teased for his nose or his sobriety. Christopher professes raw emotion, and at times he's the closest character we see throughout the show next to Tony that's an actual human that has feelings and cares. Both him and Tony come to realizations in slow motion shots. They realize that nobody cares for them in the life of the Mafia, with their supposed friends laughing at them, and how everyone around you in the Mafia is a two-face and cannot be trusted. The conflict with Adriana becoming an FBI informant was a pivotal part of Christopher's downfall. He ultimately chose Tony, the man who teased him, thought less of him as a man because of his sobriety, and could really care less for him and more for himself during the later half of the series over the woman that he loved so much in Adriana and the only person who cared for Christopher in his life. When faced with the difficult decision of leaving Adriana and never coming back to New Jersey, Christopher ultimately chose Tony and the poisonous mafia lifestyle. We knew back in season 1 that the regularness of life was too difficult for Christopher to comprehend, as he wanted to become somebody and not wind up like a normal individual in society. While he was going to be that regular person with Adriana moving away, Christopher spots a couple at the gas station who seem to be miserable. This lifestyle and fascination completely terrifies and shocks Christopher, as this spotting of the regular family quickly changes his mind as he sides with the luxurious mafia lifestyle and Tony over Adriana. We see Christopher put Tony ahead of the only person who ever had his best interest at heart, as his regretful decision of choosing Tony over the love of his life in Adriana haunted Christopher until the day he died. And after Adriana's death, Christopher copes with his feelings by slowly dabbling back into drugs and alcohol. As time went on throughout the series, Christopher comes to terms with how much he really loved Adriana, and as his relationship progressed with Tony, Christopher realized that he could never please him no matter what he did. Even by bettering himself and becoming sober, this wasn't good enough for Tony, as Tony wanted him to be normal, even despite Tony understanding Christopher's condition because he too is in therapy. Towards the end of his life, we see the tragedy of Christopher Moltisanti become extremely noticeable, as he's desperate to do anything to improve his life and his status within the mafia. He works in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, only to have the fact that he's in the mafia limit his potential to how far he can go. He marries a woman who he unintentionally gets pregnant, hoping that starting a family can fill his emptiness and loneliness that came from his distant relationship with him and Tony, but also the loss of the love of his life in Adriana. He finally follows his passion for filmmaking, which bluntly looks as a revenge fantasy towards Tony, with the film representing Christopher's feelings and how he felt lost on the inside after losing the love of his life, but also how the mafia lifestyle wasn't always the life he desperately desired. Christopher and Tony's relationship was extremely important to the overall character growth of both characters. Both Christopher and Tony viewed the death of Adriana in different ways. Christopher viewed the death of Adriana as a favor that he wasn't strong enough to do for himself, but in hindsight, this decision to kill Adriana only divided the two more, as Tony couldn't stand to hear Christopher mourn over the loss of the love of his life despite having Christopher choose him over Adriana. Tony viewed Christopher as a junkie and one who had a reason to sell him out and flip. Tony constantly worried about Christopher's well-being and flipping, especially during his filmmaking and screenwriting career. Tony justified killing Christopher in fear of being ratted out to the feds. Tony's aware of Christopher's hatred and murderous revenge towards him, whether it was basing his movie off him or despising him after the car crash with Adriana. Tony ultimately kills Christopher just to be done with him, as he was worried that he would flip and he was constantly dragging him down like he mentions in his nightmare.
To begin with, every morning I wake up thinking, is today the day that one of my best friends is gonna dime me to the FBI? And a weak, fucking, sniveling, lying drug addict? That's the worst kind of bet.
Christopher was easily the most human out of all of his mafia colleagues. He separated himself from the reality that lied within the mafia and truly wanted a way out, as he knew deep down inside he would eventually wind up dead like his father. While he did make mistakes along the way of his journey, no character suffered more than Christopher, as he grew up essentially without a father and mother, battled addictions for most of his life, had resentments towards others like his disputes with Polly and Tony B, and most importantly left behind the love of his life in Adriana by handing her over to the man he's going to hell for in Tony, only to be haunted by this decision for the rest of his life.
That's the guy, Adriana. My Uncle Tony. The guy I'm going to hell for.
Christopher's life and journey is the definition of tragic. His arc and human-like behavior made him my favorite character on the show, and one who projects the reality that comes with life. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click like and click subscribe. For more Sopranos themed content, keep it locked here, right here on this channel.